Welcome to Voices of the Writers. I'm your host, Adam Scull, bringing you a new dimension of poetry readings, songwriters, vignettes, and stories with music and sounds for the Eat, Sleep, Write podcast. Discover new writers. Learn about their huge body of work on Eat, Sleep, Write. Little Faith by Jackson Ahern, read by Adam Scull. The trail of the westbound emigrant stretched long and hard across the Great Basin. From the Washoe to the Sierra, it followed the Humboldt River through 500 miles of salt flat, sagebrush, and rocks. The journey along the California Trail was also a race against time. For if those who traveled by wagon did not cross into the Sacramento Valley before the first snow, they may never cross at all. These practical reasons, along with a deep desire to reach their new home, had made it unlikely that a small group of Conestoga wagons would be stopped dead in their tracks. The wagons were in good repair, their oxen were well fed and well rested. Yet the group of 7 men, representing the 7 wagons, stood there discussing the ominous events of the day. They were dressed in the severe black clothing and long beards that identified them as practitioners of Orthodox Judaism. Their expressions were serious, for they had an unusual concern. There was a lone rider observing them from the top of a nearby ridge. Several days before, they had met a group of Paiute hunters who had stopped to watch them, but they made gestures of peace before leaving. The rider on the ridge made no such gesture when he left. He returned shortly thereafter with 5 more riders and a riderless mule. As they wound their way through the sagebrush, it became apparent they were all armed, and the leader had his rifle drawn from the scabbard and placed across the pommel of his saddle. As the 2 groups came closer, it became apparent that they had much in common. They were dressed in the somber garments of Victorian working class. Both parties were covered in dust, and both were in the very vulnerable position of being in the middle of an inhospitable desert. As the 2 met, the leader of the mounted men spoke in a cold, monotone voice. "Are you Jews?" The men shuffled in their dusty boots and nodded that they were. A rapid series of questions followed. "Are you from the Holy Land?" "We are from Baltimore." "Do you have a Pharisee in your group?" They smiled at the quaint terms the man used. Then a man with a long white beard stepped forward. "I am a rabbi." The rabbi held a tattered book in front of his heart like a shield. The man on the horse looked down and pointed his rifle at the book. "Is that an Old Testament?" "Yes, we call it the Torah." "Well, you're gonna need it. Now get on that mule." The man again pointed his rifle, this time at the riderless mount. "May I ask what this is about?" "You'll see soon enough." The 6 other men standing on the ground became agitated and began to speak among themselves in Yiddish. The rabbi silenced them with a wave of his hand. Then in Yiddish, "If I do not return by morning, continue on." They rode back over the ridge, and there in the next valley was another group of wagons, not unlike the ones they had left behind. "It will be all right," he said in English. They were circled around a large cottonwood that stood on the bank of a dry creek. It reminded the rabbi of a tree he knew in Maryland, where runaway slaves were taken to be publicly punished. Once he had seen the tree used as a gallows for a horse thief. When they reached the wagons, they dismounted and quickly walked over to a group of 25 people. Within minutes, there was brought before the rabbi a girl and a boy of no more than 15 years of age. The boy's head was bowed in shame. His tattered hat was in his hands, and his yellow hair hung in front of his eyes. The young girl stood shoulder to shoulder with the boy. She was sobbing quietly. She wrung her hands in front of her belly. but it could not hide the fact that she was several months with child. The leader of the group set his rifle against the cottonwood tree and asked the rabbi, "Can you make this right?" Without blinking an eye, the rabbi responded, "Only they and God can make this right." The leader was embarrassed and agitated, but asked again, "Do you have the power in this God-forsaken place to make this legal?" This desert was a long way from his small congregation in Baltimore, but he responded in a heartbeat, "There is no God-forsaken place as long as there are people who believe. But to answer your question, yes, I do." And so, "I do" was said twice more, by the man-child and the woman-child. The blood returned to their white knuckles, and the desert wind dried their tears and blew away any perception of shame. A piece of unblemished white paper was laid on the barrelhead, and an inkwell and a pen were produced, and the rabbi wrote out the particulars of time and place. "When you get to Sacramento, give this to the authorities, and they will make a proper record of it." As payment for saving a yet-to-be-named child from a grave social stigma, the rabbi was paid the small fortune of $10 silver and the gift of the mule he had ridden in on. He promptly gave one of the silver dollars to the young groom. No wine was consumed, no fiddler played. The rabbi just rode away on his new mule. When he returned to his group, many questions were asked about the events of the day. He simply answered, "They gave us $9 to help build our new temple in California," and nothing more was said. When facing west, the trail can seem to stretch on endlessly, and winter can seem to loom around the corner. Danger and certain death may seem to be ever present. It did not seem that way to our little band of travelers, for it only seemed that way to those of little faith.
Thank you for joining us for another edition of Voices of the Writers, located at eatsleepwrite.net. Bringing you a new dimension of poetry, songwriters, vignettes and stories with music and sounds, for Eat Sleep Write. We would like to hear from you. Engage with us. Send your comments and questions to comments@eatsleepwrite.net, or leave a comment at the end of the podcast page. Join us again for Voices of the Writers on Eat Sleep Write.